That night in Toronto, there was a statistic the scoreboard never showed. One player stayed silent even after winning, and the one who lost, in the press conference, was openly praising her opponent. Anger was on her face, and respect too, both at once in the same breath, in the same 15 seconds of silence before she even opened her mouth. That's not normal. In sports, it rarely happens that the loser admits the winner was simply better. Not after a 3-set battle. Not after a disputed call. Not in front of cameras that are waiting for exactly the opposite reaction. Stay with me, because the real story hasn't started yet. At 2 in the morning, in a Toronto hotel room, a taped-up right ankle hung off the edge of the bed. Alex Eala couldn't sleep. The final set was the next day, and she herself didn't know how far that foot would carry her. Again and again, she'd sit up, flex the ankle slightly, check how much it hurt, and lie back down. No trainer in the room, no cameras, just her, a strapped joint, and a match 12 hours away that the entire Filipino diaspora in Canada was already planning to attend. This isn't a movie scene. This was the real night before a match that would be played, the next day, on center court in front of the whole world. Center court, National Bank Open, Toronto, official stadium capacity, 2,800 seats. But demand was for more than 5,000. People stood outside the stadium looking for tickets that simply didn't exist. Scalpers couldn't keep up. Philippine flags waved everywhere, from the lower balconies to the upper stands, small ones tied to wrists, big ones draped over shoulders like capes. This wasn't just a tennis match. This was a homecoming for an entire community, one that had waited years for this exact moment. A moment they didn't even know was coming until a 21-year-old made it happen. And on the other side stood Caty McNally, a player who, just days earlier, had beaten the reigning Wimbledon champion, a win that should have carried her into this match on pure momentum. Confidence was high. Her game plan was set, sharpened, tested, but today's crowd was against her, completely, in a way very few opponents ever have to walk into. She already knew this match would be unlike any other. A stadium standing almost entirely on one side, and in the middle of it, a lone player trusting nothing but her own game and her own preparation. In just a few moments, the score would start shifting in ways nobody predicted. In 2 weeks, Eala did what most players can't do in years. Since Wimbledon, 10 wins in 11 matches, one after another, as if nothing could stop her. With every win, her name grew bigger, but her method never changed. The same left-handed aggression that opponents kept underestimating. The same calm expression when the whole stadium was roaring against her. The same faint smile when the pressure was at its highest. Almost as if pressure was the one condition she actually preferred. 1 week she'd beat a top-ranked player who'd spent years at the top of the sport. The next, an opponent with a decade of tour experience and every trick that experience buys. And every single time, her game looked a little sharper than the last. Set 1 began, and Eala won 5 straight games right out of the gate. The score hit 6-3. The entire stadium was on its feet for her, flags waving, the noise echoing off the stands in waves. This was her peak, the highest point before the ground would shift underneath her. Then, her ankle turned. In set 2, Eala had to call a medical timeout. The trainer rushed out, tape went on the ankle in tight, careful strips, and the whole stadium watched in a silence that felt heavier than the noise before it. Her movement was clearly compromised, no longer as sharp, no longer able to change direction the way it had 10 minutes earlier. And McNally, a smart, experienced player who reads a court the way a chess player reads a board, didn't let the opportunity slip. She ran Eala side to side, again and again, on an injured foot, shot after shot, patiently, deliberately, testing exactly how much that ankle could take. Game by game, McNally claimed the set 7-5. The momentum was entirely hers now. 1 set away from victory, and the whole stadium was left wondering, quietly, painfully, if the story would end right here, on a twisted ankle and a smart opponent's game plan. Set 3, the decider. And here Eala did something risky, the kind of call that changes the entire trajectory of a match for any injured player. She had the tape removed. Completely, to move freely, no matter how much it hurt, no matter what the physio had likely warned her about. She started playing her aggressive game again, as if the Eala from set 1, the one who won 5 straight games without blinking, had simply walked back onto the court. She took a 3-1 lead. But McNally wasn't giving up either. She fought back, point by point, until the score was level again, 3-3. Now the match was completely even, both players breathing hard, both crowds, the small one and the massive one, holding their breath together. And then came the moment that changed everything. An umpire's decision, a single point, a small moment on paper, the kind that gets a single line in a match report and nothing more. But its impact was enormous, enough to flip the entire direction of the match, enough that both players would still be talking about it hours later in a quiet press room. McNally would later admit, without being pushed, that this moment stole the momentum away from her at the exact wrong time. After that call, Eala seemed to find an extra layer of confidence, an energy that hadn't been there 30 seconds earlier. She held her serve. The score moved to 5-3, and within minutes, the match was sealed, 6-4. The whole stadium rose to its feet, flags flying, a roar that part of Toronto had probably never heard so loud, not for a tennis match, not for anything. The match was over. But the real story had just begun. The press conference room was silent. McNally sat in her seat, exhausted, a little frustrated, but completely, almost unusually honest for an athlete 20 minutes removed from a loss. She said she'd been satisfied with her performance in the first 2 sets, that her game plan was working exactly the way she'd designed it, that she'd made the right decisions when it mattered. Then she spoke about the disputed call, the one that, in her view, changed the momentum of the entire match. Up to this point, everything about her answer was normal. A player explaining the reason for her loss, the way it happens after nearly every close match in every sport. But then she said something nobody in that room expected. She praised Eala. Openly, without hesitation, without the careful diplomatic hedging athletes usually reach for. She said Eala hadn't lost her composure under pressure, that she'd capitalized on the biggest moments of the match, that she'd played extremely well precisely when the stakes were highest. This wasn't the talk of a sore loser looking for a way to soften a loss. This was a competitor, in real time, honestly admitting that a better player had beaten her that day, whatever the circumstances, whatever the controversy, whatever the crowd had or hadn't influenced. Anger and respect, both at once, in the same breath, in the same press conference, coming from the same mouth within the same 60 seconds. This is the twist that changes the entire story. Why would a player who just lost give her winning opponent this much credit, unprompted, on camera, when nobody would have blamed her for staying quiet about it? Because the setback made Eala's story even more true, not less. If Eala had won without any struggle, without any injury, without any controversy hanging over the final set, this would have just been another win, another number added to a growing list. But winning, with a taped and then untaped ankle. Against a hostile crowd she'd somehow turned into fuel instead of pressure, and still holding her game together even after a controversial moment that could have rattled anyone, that's what sets this particular win apart from the other 10. Think about it carefully. If she'd lost set 2 without making a single excuse afterward, if she changed her entire game plan exactly when her foot hurt the most, then this wasn't just a match. It was a test. The specific kind every winning player eventually faces once. The kind that actually tells you what they're made of. And she passed it, right when it mattered most, with the whole match hanging on a single break of serve. Most players get defensive after an injury. They simplify their game. They stop taking risks, protect what they have left, play it safe until the body catches up. Eala did the opposite. She removed the tape and played her most aggressive tennis, exactly when every rational instinct in the sport says to play it safe. Now let's zoom out a little further. Why is the whole world watching this? Not just tennis fans, but people scrolling through clips who couldn't tell you the rules of a tiebreak? Because everywhere, in every country, there's someone who's been underestimated. Someone overlooked because of their name, their background, where they're from. Someone who stands alone for their community, in front of the entire world, carrying weight that has nothing to do with the actual scoreline. In Toronto, more than 5,000 people stood outside a court whose official capacity was only 2,800, simply because a 21-year-old was giving them the feeling that their pride was standing on that court too, right there with her. For them, representing something bigger than a single match result. The tournament director himself said the demand was so high that the grandstand court turned out to be too small, that he had never seen this level of ticket demand for a single match at that venue. Not for a top seed, not for a former champion, for her. This wasn't just tennis. This was a statement from an entire community, one that had waited years, maybe decades, for someone of their own to stand on a stage like this one and hold their own against the very best in the world. And McNally herself, before the match had even started, had said publicly that what Eala is doing for tennis is unreal, that she's filling stadiums that used to have empty seats for smaller matches. That came from an opponent's mouth, not a commentator's, not a highlight reel caption written after the fact. And that's exactly what gives it so much weight. But this is only the beginning. Reaching the round of 16 at a WTA 1000 event, winning with an injured ankle, earning open, unprompted respect from an opponent in a press room, all of this is just one chapter, not the whole book. The next step is the US Open, where every analyst, every commentator, every rival's coaching team will now put her name on the list of serious contenders, not as a surprise entry anymore, not as a feel-good story, but as a genuine threat. Look at her age. Born in 2005, still years, possibly her entire prime, away from her actual ceiling. In the coming seasons, there are at least 3 things that will almost certainly happen. Deeper runs on the bigger Grand Slam stages, the kind she's already had glimpses of at smaller tournaments, but now translated to the biggest courts in the sport. Quarterfinal and semifinal level stages where the margins get razor thin. Consistent upsets against top 10 players, because she isn't the unknown quantity she was even 6 months ago. Everyone studies her game now, everyone prepares for the left-handed aggression, the composure under pressure, and they're still losing to it. Because her game was never built on surprise. It was built on something far harder to defend against. Real, repeatable skill. And a fan base that will only keep growing no matter where in the world she plays, no matter which city, which continent, which time zone. Because this isn't just support from one country anymore. It's become a movement. Visible in sold-out grandstands, in trending clips, on television broadcasts that suddenly have to account for a market they weren't planning for. She's still learning. She's still refining her game, match by match, injury by injury, pressure moment by pressure moment, building a version of herself that hasn't fully arrived yet. And that is the single most frightening thing for the players who will face her in the rounds ahead and the tournaments still to come. What they just watched in Toronto, the composure, the resilience, the willingness to play aggressive tennis on an injured leg wasn't the finished product. It was only the beginning. That night in Toronto, one player, even in the sting of defeat, gave her opponent the biggest compliment possible, with complete honesty, no filter, no spin. And on the other side of that same room, a young woman standing with an injured ankle, surrounded by her country's flags on that court hours earlier, had stood quietly through it all, as if she already knew, deep down, that the next point mattered more than the last one, the way it always had, the way it probably always will. This is the moment people will remember years from now, when this name echoes everywhere, in every stadium and every conversation about the sport. Everywhere someone asks themselves quietly if they too could go this far one day, starting from nothing but belief and a taped-up ankle. Comment below and let us know. Do you think that disputed call was fair, or was the real story always bigger than one single point? In a few years, when everyone knows this name, you'll want a record of when you knew first.